People who knew murderers. When did you know something was off? Obligatory didn't know him as a friend, but a regular customer in my shop. He would come in after his shift to buy beer and tobacco. On one occasion he caught and helped us to evict a shoplifter. He seemed friendly enough. Then a local girl went missing and was eventually pulled out of a river a few weeks later. They announced they were looking for somebody in connection with her death, and it was him. They had CCTV footage of him tailing her through a park and footage of him buying beer in a shop. Still unconfirmed to this day being our shop as they blurred out the surroundings. Anyway, as we had a TV in our shop, switched to the news channel as it was a rolling story local to us. We started to discuss the guy, if we saw him on the day she went missing. That kind of thing. We hadn't. But it was at that point when one of my staff, a young girl, who had previously said to management that she didn't want to work the closing shift anymore because there was too many creepy men around, told us that he used to stare at her when he came into the store in a way that made her uncomfortable enough to not want to be on the floor when he came in. They never got to question him about the murder as he was found dead in a local park a few days later. He'd hung himself. I went through primary and high school with a guy in the year below me who seemed a little distant. We lived near each other and caught the bus from the same stop. He was a bit of a bully, but it was something more. Like you could tell he wasn't a bully because he was hurting inside or because he felt threatened in some way. He was a bully because he did what he wanted to do and didn't realize that it hurt other people. Like the kind of kid who enjoyed pulling wings off flies. Not long after I left my hometown I heard that he had been charged with the murder of a 2-year-old. Apparently his girlfriend at the time left her daughter with him for an hour or so while she ran an errand. He couldn't deal with the toddler crying anymore, so he beat her. He caused severe internal bleeding, and she died in hospital not long after. He would have been around 22 when he did it. He was sentenced to 36 years with a non-parole period of 27 years. Edit. This happened in Australia around 2014. I knew a guy who killed his dad with a baseball bat, found not guilty. I met his dad when he came into the bar I worked at. He was a nightmare. He would squeeze people's hands when he shook them. He and his son were both boxers and the dad was really rough with him apparently. The day he was found not guilty he sent a text to someone at the base saying, "I told you I would get off. Dude, that hand squeezing thing is f***ed up, and I've experienced it and truly believe it's the mark of a sadist." I remember one guy doing it to me when I was a little girl and how his eyes gleamed as I yelled and finally managed to grab my hand back. There are a lot of closet weirdos out there. I moved to a new town when I was 19 and was making new friends at my new job. I met this girl at work and she invited me over to hang out with her and her best friend. I went and the best friend's boyfriend was there and the vibes were way off. I was uncomfortable. He was cold and just seemed angry for no reason. They had mentioned to me before he got there that he was always controlling and had hit the girl before. Turns out controlling was an understatement. She came home one day and he was digging a hole in the backyard and she asked what he was doing and he replied, "Digging your grave." He hit her. Said if he can't have her, nobody could have her. All of that. So eventually she left him and had to get a restraining order and everything. He somehow persuaded her to get in a car with him on her work break and they went missing for a few days. Turns out he stabbed her to death, threw her in a river and killed himself. I met the girl only a few times and him only the once, but the face that I was in such close proximity to someone capable of that gives me chills. She was so young. It was really sad. Unfortunately, the stats on women being murdered by their intimate partners are pretty grim. This is just one of many cases. Unfortunately, yeah. Women are more likely to be murdered after they leave their abusers. When he said there was a teenager, his mother and his stepfather lived around the corner from me. My mother knew them better than myself, but we all thought they were lovely. A couple of years ago the son went to the hospital several times asking for help. He claimed he had voices telling him to kill his stepfather. But each time he went he was released and told to come back. They would give an appointment. A few weeks later during a small argument he stabbed his stepfather to death in the front garden. He turned himself in the next day and wasn't convicted as he sought help before it happened. Instead, He got the treatment he needed. Edit: I see a lot of people wondering if it might have been a defense planned murder. It wasn't. The way he was killed and how the son acted after removed any doubt. I worked at a box store about 20 years ago. A guy I worked with was always off and would give away pocket knives to other employees. One day he came in with scratches all over his face. He had raped and murdered a disabled girl the day before using a pocket knife he had given our co-worker later that day. Friend of the family's always had a thing about taking pocket knives as a gift, a superstition about how it was bad luck and would result in the knife somehow ending up in your back. Metaphorically speaking. Turns out it was good advice in this instance. My grandfather gave me a pocket knife when I was a little kid, but made me give him a penny for it. It is thought to sever the relationship when you give someone a knife. I never suspected a thing. She was the nicest woman. I even let her babysit my cousin when I had custody of him for a little while. She was my neighbor couple houses down and everyone loved her. She grew gigantic pumpkins, was always outside, so everyone interacted with her a lot. I moved away, and a few years later, and was shocked to hear everything from my family and friends who still loved in the area. The story. She was married to a man. I knew him from my time living there too. One day, he was just gone. She was all beaten up. She said he beat her up. We always suspected this happened before this incident and had left her because he got a woman pregnant a few towns over. We never heard from him again, but didn't really have a reason to. She would mention every once in a while that he was still harassing her and was even beat up on another occasion after his disappearance. He was self-employed and didn't really have any family. No one suspected anything. 3 years later she was dating another man. While dating this man, the police had been investigating her for stealing money from the grocery store she worked at. They went to the boyfriend's cabin, where they both were, to arrest her. She came to the door, said okay, let me go, put on some clothes. The police waited at the door. I obviously wasn't here for this part, so this is what I hear. The police then hear 2 gunshots. They run inside, and she had poured gasoline and set the house on fire, then shot her dog, then herself. It took some time to get the house fire under control. Once they did, and began investigating, they found another body in the basement that didn't die in the fire, but several days earlier. The body in the basement was her boyfriend. Then, they began investigating further and found a blue 55-gallon drum in her backyard that contained her husband. So, she killed 2 people and her dog, and all she was suspected of was stealing from the grocery store. Edited to clarify that the body in the basement was the boyfriend and to correct the time frame between the husband's disappearance and her dating the boyfriend. I fact checked with the news article. I was way off on the time frame originally. Many have asked for the link to a news article. This one is long, but here it is link. Is it weird? I feel that she could have gotten away with it if she would have stepped out of the house and went with the police. There is a chance they would not have investigated the cabin depending on exactly how the grocery theft went down and what they wanted to see. I didn't. He was the sweetest, kindest, gentle giant kind of guy. Kind of a weirdo, but still a great guy overall. I remember once that he shed a tear just by talking about his kid because he was so filled with emotion from having him in his life. He turned out to kill his wife, kidnap his child, start the longest Amber Alert in the history of Canada. As he tried escaping to a different province, he killed another man to steal his car. I'm still unsure today if I should have seen anything at any point. It comes to haunt my nightmares from time to time. The murderer I know was more of an acquaintance or casual friend. He lived down the hall from me and we hung out sometimes, but not like just the 2 of us. Still, we chill at each other's place regularly. I passed him one day in the stairwell and I said hi. He said hi back, but called me by the wrong name. He was really distracted and kind of awkward. He didn't make eye contact and kept moving. I remember thinking maybe we don't know each other as well as I thought. Later he was playing Nintendo. Yep, my N64 - this was a while ago with my roommate. When I came home, he apologized and said his mind was elsewhere. A couple days later there are cops all over the building, interviewing people and searching his place. They'd found the guy's rumored with a bullet in the back of his head in an abandoned lot across town. The next day he confessed. Had an employee on my work crew. Acted strange and wouldn't listen to direction. Had goofy huge sideburns. Ended up going to jail for a short time. When he got out he shot his GF and her parents. Not sure if this fits here, but it's a sad story nonetheless. About 4-5 years ago my mom hired this man to remodel her kitchen because he had been recommended to her by a bunch of people. The day he shows up, he has his 11-year-old daughter with him to help out. The second I see the both of them, I think he's molesting her. Don't know why. Have zero proof of it. Just a weird feeling, and his vibe totally creeped me out. Maybe because she was so young. He mentioned having another girl and a son. And she should been in school. He brought her over every day for 2 weeks while he did the kitchen. She was seemingly happy and fine, so I just sort of kept that in the back of my mind. Every day I would ask my mom when he'd be done so he could get the heck out of her house because he was so creepy and I didn't want him around us. My mom ignored it and told me she didn't understand because he did good work and was really nice. Cut to about a year later, and my mom calls me and goes, "Hey, remember Andrew? The guy who did my kitchen?" I said yeah. Why? Did he get caught molesting his daughter? She goes up, "How did you know that?" Turns out he had been brutally torturing his entire family, not only molesting his children, but did stuff like tie his son to a shed outside and make him eat his own feces. All in the name of Christ. They fled from him in the middle of the night and he's now in prison for the rest of his life. I knew this kid my entire life. We were friends in elementary and middle school, more middle school. He was your typical redneck kid, but a kind person. Imagine if Pinky from Pinky and the Brain grew up in the rural south. Well, as people do in school, we drifted apart. He honestly wasn't the person in the group I was friends with, he was just in that circle. So we went about our lives. A year after we graduated in the same town we all grew up in, he killed his entire family. Mother, brother, stepsister, father, just for no reason. Nothing really provoked him from my understanding. He left and went to ride ATVs with his friend later that day. They caught him, and he had no memory of it. He went to court and got life, and never could recount a single moment, at least he said. It was weird seeing this kid who was to your knowledge just dumber than a bag of hammers, yet a odd innocence to him, on trail for such atrocities. He just sat stone-faced the entire time, almost like he didn't understand what had happened. Not to say I felt bad for him, but I felt something. Sadness perhaps. My BO dad ended up murdering my stepmom. Everyone in my family, my mom and 2 older brothers, definitely knew that something was up. He had severe anger issues and was very abusive. Some of the earlier memories I have are of him choking one of my brothers. He even almost choked my mom to death a couple of times. Obviously my mom was smart and divorced him as he didn't want to see him kill my brothers. Years later I come home from school and my mom and stepdad take us all to the side and tell us he shot our stepmom and was currently in jail. None of us were surprised. If anything, I was just so grateful my mom left him. It's so strange that I'm directly related to a murderer.